Welcome to the Global Current, your window to the world. On today's show, soccer hooliganism in Europe, and another helicopter shot down in Iraq. And we'll look at Spanish artist Miguel Barceló. But first, headlines.
Good morning, this is Stephanie Whiteman
and Elisa Gomez
with your international news headlines. North Korea talks began on a promising note. China takes charge of making and distributing a multilateral agreement. Delegates said the draft outlines the main points of the talks. It provides steps for reaching the agreement drafted in September of 2005. This agreement concerns the freezing of North Korea's nuclear program and the return of the IAEA. Japan is holding to its position that it will offer no assistance until North Korea addresses the abduction of Japanese nationals. Despite this, Assistant Secretary of State Christopher Hill predicts this agreement to be consolidated and reached in a matter of single-digit weeks. North Korean leader Kim Jong-il is showing change of attitude. He refused to discuss the idea of denuclearization during the last round of talks in December 2006. This time, denuclearization is being discussed in the first week of talks. The South Korean delegate said the talks need to move beyond words and involve action. Joint efforts, wisdom, and flexibility from all 6 countries are badly needed now more than any other time.
Fatah and Hamas reach an agreement over governmental power. Representatives from the two parties, including Fatah President Mahmoud Abbas and Hamas leader Khalid Mashal, signed off on the deal at a summit meeting in Mecca, Saudi Arabia on Thursday. The meeting was called after weeks of violence in Gaza between Hamas and Fatah factions. The agreement outlines the division of governmental posts and the creation of a unity government incorporating both parties. Leaders of both parties have called for an immediate cessation of violence within Gaza. Mr. Mashal referred to the past weeks as the dark days and stated that there would be no return to violence within Gaza. Although Hamas has agreed to respect previously made agreements with Israel, they have not agreed to formally recognize Israel as a state.
In Japan, plans are underway to form a National Security Council. The council will comprise of the Prime Minister, Chief Cabinet Secretary, Foreign Minister, and Defense Minister. It is expected to be established by April 2008, according to government officials. The council will be headed by the Prime Minister and will constitute a reorganized version of the Security Council of Japan. The council would discuss such issues as energy, environment, official development assistance, as well as foreign and security policies. This action comes after increased tensions with China and North Korea.
Iraqi health minister arrested during raid. The U.S. charges al-Zamili with aiding Shia militiamen and using ambulances to transport weapons used in insurgent attacks. He's also charged with illegally channeling millions of dollars to Muqtada al-Sadr's Mehdi army and is implicated in the deaths of a number of Iraqi officials. Al-Zamili is a leading member of Sadr's radical Shia political group, which has been at odds with the U.S. forces in Iraq. Iraqi officials claim that U.S. troops broke down the door of the health ministry's offices and searched through the rooms, overturning tables and computers in the process. Sadr's group accused the U.S. of provocation and urged the government to take immediate action to free al-Zamili.
Construction in China endangers cultural heritage. Construction projects taking place in Beijing have unearthed several archaeological sites and priceless artifacts. In all, scientists excavated 700 ancient burial sites. The artifacts include porcelain urns, jade jewelry, and more than 6,000 ancient coins. Also found was a mausoleum filled with bodies of eunuchs from the Han Dynasty. China's past protection of cultural heritage has not been exemplary. Often, excavation sites are simply bulldozed over to make way for booming industrial growth. Another problem is looters who steal the most valuable artifacts from excavation sites and destroy everything else. Recently, China has shown more caution and care when dealing with such issues.
Norway unveils Doomsday Vault. The Norwegian government unveiled plans this week for an international seed vault. It will be built into a mountainside on a remote island near the North Pole. The purpose of the vault is to maintain the world's agricultural diversity. This diversity may be affected by potential catastrophes such as global warming, nuclear war, or disease. The construction is set to begin in March, and Norway is paying the $5 million cost of the vault. It will house 3 million seed samples and will open in 2008.
Turmoil in Zimbabwe. The National Power Authority warns of a collapse of electrical and water treatment services. A lack of clean water has already prompted an outbreak of cholera in the nation's capital. Experts point to hyperinflation as the cause for the deteriorating situation in Zimbabwe. Inflation reached an annual rate of over 1,200% this month. The government's bankrupt economy has had devastating effects on the country's factories and farms.
Spain ends additional troop deployment in Afghanistan. Spanish Defense Minister José Antonio Alonso announced that Spain would maintain the size of its peacekeeping force in Afghanistan. Spain currently has 690 troops stationed in Afghanistan. Alonso says the amount of troops is enough to help fulfill the peacekeeping and reconstruction mission. Spain has spent $890 million on the mission and has deployed about 7,000 soldiers.
South African HIV vaccine trial. South African government has announced the beginning of the world's first ever large-scale HIV vaccine. According to the press releases from South Africa's Ministry of Health, the vaccine will be created by the drug company Merck. They plan to test it on 3,000 HIV-negative men and women aged between 18 and 35. The project name is FAMBILI, meaning moving forward. 1.5 million AIDS orphans are living in South Africa today.
Camel smuggling. Russian authorities believe they have uncovered a criminal ring responsible for the smuggling of camels from Kazakhstan. The Kazakh camels are smuggled into the Astrakhan region of Russia. Kazakh citizens suspected of smuggling 14 camels have been jailed. Russian authorities believe there may have been more cases.
Katrina victims sue. Victims of Hurricane Katrina are suing the federal government for negligence. The suit targets a failure in the construction of flood walls on the 17th Street Canal. Victims say the U.S. Army of Engineers allowed for the canal to be built in a way that would facilitate draining. However, there were warnings on how this would weaken the flood walls. These were the first walls to collapse shortly after Katrina hit the shores of New Orleans. They are responsible for 80% of the flooding. Because of this, almost 600 lives were lost of the total 1,300 attributed to the storm. The lawsuit seeks class action and unspecified damages.
Colombian Army officer cheats death. The Colombian Army found Captain Leonardo Nourangel, a hostage of the ENL leftist rebel group. Nourangel had already been declared dead when the Army found him tied to a tree. Captain Nourangel had been taken hostage in the southern part of the country and kept under strict supervision. Had he not been saved, he would have been turned over to the FARC, the other larger rebel group organization. He has been now reunited with his family.
U.S. and Brazil seeks accord on ethanol. Representatives from the United States and Brazil will be meeting this week to discuss the spread of ethanol use in Latin America. Together, the two countries produce 70% of the world's ethanol. Any accords made will be to encourage the spread of technology and information. This will allow for other Latin American countries to begin using biofuel as a substitute. These measures are also aimed to counter Hugo Chávez's influence in Latin America. He has used economic frustrations and high oil revenue to form alliances in the region. President Bush has called for a 20% decrease in gasoline consumption by the year 2017. Brazil and America will no longer be competitors, but partners if the accords are signed.
No more young models. The influential Sao Paulo Fashion Week will no longer be allowing models under the age of 16 to participate. France and Italy have already set similar limits in order to curb deaths caused by eating disorders. In Brazil, girls as young as 13 leave their homes to pursue modeling careers. Last year, Ana Carolina Reston died at the age of 21 from starvation. Efforts to include greater parental involvement, closer supervision, and the use of health advisors may also help industry abuses.